Dr. Margaret Cochran, and this is Selma. We're going to talk about cognitive distortions. Oh yes, very hot topic. And they are responsible for more misery, suffering, and ridiculously destructive behavior than you can imagine. Oh yes. To put it succinctly, cognitive distortions are all about making incorrect, faulty assumptions about without benefit of facts or reality testing, treating them as though they're real and proceeding to live your life and make decisions as though they're all true. Sounds fun, right? Actually, not so much. In fact, living that way is not much fun at all, as some will tell you. But many people will use one or more cognitive distortions on a daily basis. Perhaps you know some people who do that. Perhaps you are one of them. We shall see. There are so many yummy cognitive distortions to go through. So let's get at it, shall we? Number 1, all or nothing thinking, sometimes called polarized thinking. In this mindset, it's all or nothing. We have to be perfect or we are an abject failure. Everything is seen in extremes. Number 2, negativity, error, or overgeneralization. You dwell on a single negative event and you perceive it as a never-ending pattern. For example, one bad grade in college is a sign that the student who receives it is a failure and should just quit school. Number 3, rejecting the positive or filtering. In this scenario, the person magnifies negative details while filtering out any positive ones. For example, I got 98% on my test, which means I missed 2, so I'm a failure. This way of thinking makes life look very sad and depressing indeed. Number 4, negative prognostications. This is one of my personal favorites. This kind of thinking makes it impossible to have any fun at all. You simply predict that all upcoming events are either going to be unpleasant, uninteresting, or not worth your time. Mind reading or jumping to conclusions. This is a fun one too. This one really wreaks havoc in romantic relationships, but due to its versatility, it can also destroy other kinds of relationships as well. Friendships, collegial connections, family ties, yes, family ties, neighbors, they can all be damaged. And this way of thinking can literally wreck any connection you put in its way. Good girl. It can even cause you to misinterpret the behavior of animals. And with this one, you're sure that you know what others are thinking and feeling, and you just make it more interesting by assuming that you also know why they act the way they do. And you needn't be burdened with any pesky truth or fact-finding. You might, for example, decide that someone has a grudge against you and not bother with any sort of verification. Or you might use this type of thinking to anticipate that things will turn out badly in your next relationship, so why bother dating? Number 6, binocular thinking. Using this type of reasoning, you exaggerate or minimize the importance of something until it's either huge or minuscule. For example, George drinks 12 beers at a sitting, but that's no big deal. George drinks a glass of wine every night. He must be an alcoholic. All life events become the worst thing ever or of no importance. Number 7, emotional logic or reasoning. This one's a classic. It goes like this. If I feel it, it must be true. Whatever you are feeling at any given time about anything or anyone must be true. Enough said. Number 8, shoulds. Should, must, ought, and supposed to. These are some of the most deadly words in any language. First of all, shoulds do not work as motivators. In fact, quite the opposite. They just make you feel shouldy. The premise here is that there exists some set of secret ironclad rules that should govern everyone's behavior. Spoiler alert, not true. Shoulds are shame words that only serve to hurt you, and when directed at others, they generate feelings of anger, frustration, and resentment. Number 9, pejorative judgment or global labeling. This is an extreme version of overgeneralization. Using this type of thinking, you generalize one or two qualities into a negative global judgment about yourself or other people. For example, instead of saying that someone drops off their dog at the daycare center, if using this type of thinking, you'd say they abandon their dog and leave it with strangers. Number 10, personalization. This assumption is that everything is about you. In this kind of thinking, it causes a person to compare themselves to others constantly and trying to determine who's smarter, who's prettier, and so forth. Number 11, heaven's reward fallacy. This is the entirely false belief that one's sacrifice and self-denial will be rewarded, as if some unseen global force is keeping score. This kind of thinking inevitably leads to a great deal of bitterness when the much anticipated reward doesn't materialize. Number 12, always being right. Being wrong is unacceptable with this type of thinking. The person who thinks in this way will go to any lengths to demonstrate their rightness. Being right is so much more important than anything else, including the feelings of others, no matter who they might be. Number 13, fallacy of change. The belief here is that a person expects others will change to suit them if they just cajole, pressure, or demand it of them. In this way of thinking, a person must have the people in their life change because they believe that their hopes and happiness and success lay in the hands of other people. I can't be happy unless George/Susan gives me this, does this for me, agrees with me, etc. Number 14, blaming. In this mindset, people other than themselves are held responsible for any emotional disappointment or pain. Number 15, the fallacy of fairness. In this thought process, the person using it believes that they know what is fair. And as life doesn't always measure up to their rules, they often feel resentful, angry, and hopeless. The truth is, life is not fair or unfair. It just is. Number 16, control fallacy. This thinking is on a continuum. On one end, the person feels externally controlled and they are helpless victims of fate. On the other end of the continuum is the notion of internal control, that the person thinks that they're responsible for the pain and happiness of everyone around them. Number 17, awfulizing and catastrophizing. Predicting terrible outcomes and expecting disaster to strike at all times. This style of thinking is punctuated by lots of negative magnification and what if this or that terrible thing might happen to me sorts of questions. So, how do you change cognitive distortions? Although it may seem daunting at first glance, it can be done, I promise. As the saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles is begun with the first step. So let's begin. Step 1. Identify the cognitive distortion. First, begin by determining the cognitive distortions that you use in your daily life. Write them down. Focus on them and work on identifying them as you think them. You can actually make it fun to catch yourself. Step 2. Examine the evidence. At this point in the process, you need to step back and work at removing emotionality from the equation. Look at the thoughts connected to any given event and decide if those statements reflect an opinion or a fact. For example, I'm a horrible person, or there's something wrong with me. Those are opinions. If you say, I didn't get to work on time or forgot to pay the electric bill, those are facts. Separating fact from fiction allows you to determine which part of your thinking you need to change. Step 3. The double standard. We frequently give poorer advice and speak less well to ourselves than we do to others. It's important that you talk to yourself and give yourself the same thoughtful and supportive advice that you give to anyone else. For example, you probably would not tell someone else that they're a loser because their report was late. You would probably commiserate with them and ask them what circumstances led up to the incident. Then you might explore with them what could be done to reduce the possibility of it happening again. Treat yourself accordingly. Step 4. Thinking in shades of gray or even pastels. Instead of thinking in terms of black and white, consider things on a continuum. For example, evaluate how things are going on a success scale of 1 to 10. 1 is a distinct lack of success and 10 is the best result imaginable. Look at where your efforts really lie on that scale rather than thinking of them as perfect or as an abject failure. Step 5. The experimental method. Don't consider your assumptions to be facts. I cannot emphasize that enough. For example, if you've been avoiding a task because you think it's too hard, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being highly undesirable and 10 being highly desirable, rate how desirable or undesirable you think the task or event you are facing is. If it's a job to be done, break it down into smaller parts and do them in short spurts of effort, say 20 to 45 minutes. rather than trying to do it all at once. Or if it's an event, go to the event and set a time limit of an hour or so. And if you're having a good time, you can stay longer. If you're not enjoying yourself, go home. Following either of the above, relate the task or event back to your 1 to 10 scale and see what the rating really is. Or if you've decided that your friends are all mad at you, rather than avoiding them based on an assumption, why not test this hypothesis by inviting one or some of them to join you in a social activity? This will provide you with an opportunity to talk with your friends and give you a more realistic picture of the state of your relationships. Step 6, the survey method. Check the rationality of your thoughts with other people. For example, if you assume that happy couples never fight, ask some of your friends if this is true in their relationships. And I can tell you the answer right now. It's yes, they do. All couples fight to some degree. This method is another way to gain perspective in your thought process and judgment. Step 7, change your semantics. Instead of using should, must, ought, and supposed to, use want, need, and demand instead. Watch how much your life will change when you become self-determined and responsible only unto yourself. Step 8, definitions. You know the old phrase about questioning authority? Well, it's time to question the authority of your assumptions. For example, if you think of yourself as undesirable, ask yourself, undesirable to whom? And compare to whom? Undesirable to everyone, or only people taller than yourself? Are you the only one in the world that's undesirable? Aren't other people undesirable too? The more questions you ask about the usefulness or lack of usefulness of a label, the more you may come to realize that labels not only don't tell the truth, they don't deserve or serve you in any constructive manner. Step 9, cost-benefit analysis. List the advantages and disadvantages of distorted thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Ask yourself, how will this help me or hurt me to believe this negative, irrational belief? And are the thoughts and feelings I'm assigning to the events helping me move forward toward the achievement of my goals or keeping me from achieving them altogether? If the way you're looking at people, events, and yourself is negative and limiting, you're cheating yourself and those around you. Now, wasn't that fun? Seriously, it's a good thing to look at the tools we use and evaluate whether or not they're serving us very well. Some of those cognitive distortions are pretty funny once you get a little distance from them. It's good to laugh at ourselves. It makes life fun and interesting. After all, those who choose to laugh at their own behavior are guaranteed to be endlessly amused. Well, we've come to the end of our time, haven't we, Selma? Yes. Thank you for joining me. And until we next meet, I'm Dr. Margaret Cochran, and I'm wishing you lots of rational and undistorted thinking and a perfectly delightful amount of wisdom, love, and magic. Yes, Selma. Oh, yes.